Welcome back to Holy Banter. This is Christina Steele.
And I'm Andrea Simpson. This is my first Holy Banter, and I'm so excited to be here. And we are here with Father Tyler Kreipke, fellow Zionsville Eagle.
Yes.
And fellow St. Alphonsus VBS volunteer alum.
Yep. That.
Exactly. Christine and I know you as a priest, but we don't know pre-Father Tyler.
Yeah.
So we would love to hear more about your faith and your family growing up.
Okay.
And did you grow up in Zionsville?
Yeah, I grew up in Zionsville, just about a mile away from the parish. I live in between 8th and 9th Street on Poplar.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a walk, and not even that long of a walk to get from here at the parish to my house. Local raised and grown.
Nice. And what did your faith look like when you were growing up in the village?
Yeah, so I think this is some kind of well known in the parish, but I'm actually a convert, but was raised as a Christian. I was raised as a Methodist, and so very grateful for my family and for the context in which I was raised. We did kind of the standard, Christian thing when I was growing up: church on Sunday, building up a life of prayer, getting to know Jesus Christ. And so while I was growing up here in Zionsville, was just kind of laying those basic foundations of coming to know Jesus Christ, of developing the virtues and the habits of, okay, well, Sunday is the Lord's day, and so we're gonna get up and we're gonna go to church. And so it was just laying a lot of the groundwork that when the time came and the Spirit started to move, had set me up to be able to be supple to the Spirit's call, to be docile to His will. And so I'm just very grateful. Had a very good experience of faith growing up in the Methodist Church, and I'm still very grateful for all the work that was done back then.
So what was Tyler the boy like? What did you enjoy doing? Were you in sports or anything?
Yeah, so I did a lot of sports, and I was pretty involved with things as I was growing up. I have an older brother, and I followed after his footsteps in a lot of ways. He's much bigger than me, and so he was a football player, and I wanted to go out and play football, and so I played football a lot when I was a kid. And he started wrestling, so I started wanting to wrestle as well. By the time we had got to high school, we had started to form our own paths a little bit more, distinguish ourselves a little bit, so that when I got to high school, my sports changed to cross country and wrestling and track rather than football, which I think was a better move for all parties involved. But yeah, and then just loved being engaged in Zionsville. Growing up, I had a close group of friends that would get together after school, and we'd just kind of hang out, ride bikes around town, find stuff to get into and up to, and just kind of do all the standard young kid games and playing football and things like that. Yeah, just really, really loved my time growing up in Zionsville with the family that I had and the friends that I was able to enjoy that time with.
Neat.
And what year did you graduate?
2007.
2007.
Coming up on the 20-year reunion now.
Oh my God.
Are you going to go?
Maybe it's a long flight from Portland, Oregon,
that's
where I
true.
live and work now, but it would be nice. I did go to the 10-year reunion when I was still a little closer, so I suppose that'll maybe be a game time decision when it comes up a little closer. So, yeah.
I was 2004.
Okay, so not too far behind.
No, not too far off.
1 year before my older brother.
Yeah.
So he was 2005.
That's right.
And so then you graduated, and where did you go after that?
So I went to Rose-Hulman Institute of Technology after high school, and I studied biomedical engineering there. And then from Rose-Hulman, went up to the University of Notre Dame to study for my doctorate in bioengineering, and then went from Notre Dame to the seminary at Notre Dame. So just kind of ended up hanging around there and lingering for a while. And then after that, began my work at the University of Portland, where I continue to work and minister.
That's amazing. When you were at undergrad, were you thinking about what you wanted to do with that degree, or is that just something that interested you?
Yeah, I was, when I went to Rose-Hulman and first started up there, I was thinking kind of along the standard lines of, okay, there's the biomedical industry up in Warsaw, Indiana. And so I figured I'd probably stay close in Indiana and follow the standard path, work in industry, get married, have some kids, do that path of life. But things kind of changed along the way. As I moved through that time, found that I really liked the material I was studying And I don't know how like the idea of my hopes for being a professor kind of started up, but I do remember somewhere along the way started thinking, hey, it might be a lot of fun to teach this material that I'm working with, and
Yeah.
might enjoy being a professor. And so decided to apply for grad school. And when I was kind of looking around, Notre Dame just seemed to fit really well in a lot of different ways. And so was accepted there and went and started studying there and continued to pursue that idea of being a professor.
So when you went to Notre Dame, your mind was set on being a professor then at that time. You hadn't had the thoughts of becoming Father Tyler then.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well,
It was
yeah.
not anywhere on the radar.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so you're still practicing your Methodist faith at this time?
So I had actually decided to become Catholic by that point. So
Oh, okay. So,
yeah.
yeah, tell us that
Yeah.
story.
So when I was going off to undergrad, kind of that summer beforehand, the Spirit just started to move. And like, I don't know why I asked myself this question, but I just remember the Spirit starting to move and thinking like, okay, well, I'm headed to Terre Haute, Indiana. I could just find the Methodist church down in Terre Haute and plug in, and that's all she wrote. But there was just something in me that was like, no, this is the time to start exploring and start like owning your faith in a new way. And don't know why I decided to start going sort of open season on looking into my faith, but grateful that it occurred, promptings of the Spirit. You can't really predict it.
Mhm.
But yeah, so that summer, as I was starting to prepare for undergrad and leaving for college, started to dig into my faith a little more deeply and, understand some of the nuances between the different denominations of Christianity. I had maybe philosophically entertained the idea of other faith traditions for maybe 1 second, but came back home to Christianity very, very, very
Mhm.
quickly in the process. But was still sort of intrigued by the different denominations of Christianity and what distinguished those things. And so started looking into each of them. And I actually had a very close friend, Neil Baxter, who was going into the seminary at the Josephinum at the time. And I told him about sort of, what my thoughts were and everything I was going through. And he just sort of jumped on the opportunity. He got me starting to talk about Catholicism and what it was. And I think more importantly, what it wasn't, because
Mm.
I think in high school, I held every misconception about the Catholic faith that there is. And so I was actually pretty staunchly anti-Catholic even
Mhm.
as a sophomore in high school. And yeah, just had some very good conversations with a good friend about the faith. And he got me talking to Father Brian Dorr, who was here at the time as
Mhm.
well. And yeah, just started dismantling some of the misconceptions that I had. And I think the most important thing that he did was he invited me to Mass. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'll go. And went, and Father O'Keefe was here and he preached. The main thing I remember about it was like he mentioned the stigmata. And so I can't remember exactly which reading it was, but he talked about like bearing the marks of Christ. And it was one of those where it was like, I didn't really know what was going on. It was fine. Mass was
Yeah.
fine, but I was like, okay, I wasn't over the moon for it
Mhm.
or anything. But Neil invited me back, and I was like, yeah, I guess I'll come back. And that just kind of set me on a road. When I got down to Rose-Hulman, I was running cross country for the college, and so we were kind of in the preseason, getting to know the team and everything, and we were having a little social at one of the seniors' houses, and I was actually going to leave to go to the welcome mass at Rose-Hulman, and he was like, Tyler, stay, hang out. Enjoy the evening with us a little bit more. I'll take you to the parish that I go to downtown tomorrow, and we'll go to Mass together. And that just got me plugged into the Catholic
Oh,
scene
wow.
at Rose-Hulman. And over the next year was just kind of just the slow draw of grace, closer and closer to the faith, so that by the end of freshman year, I was like, okay, yeah, I think this is what I want to do. And I admittedly dragged my feet for a little while. There was a lot of things going on in undergrad, sports and studying and all that. And I didn't have a grasp of everything that kind of went into the RCIA process. And so didn't get around to it when I was in all of my years in undergrad. But then, yeah,
Interesting.
so I had been going to Mass for essentially 4 years by the time I got to Notre Dame, but still just hadn't come around. And so by the time I got up to Notre Dame, it was kind of like, okay, Tyler, if not here, then where? And if not now, then when? And so my first year in grad school at Notre Dame, decided to become Catholic and go through the RCIA process, and got plugged in with a parish in town, went through the RCIA process, and was received into the church there. So that was kind of the movement into the Catholic faith for me, was just this long and slow and steady draw of grace into the church.
So
And
were there
lots of invitation.
Yes. Yeah.
That's true, that
So
personal invitation. Well, and Andrea was saying before you came.
Yes. Yeah. So, like I said, I mean, we were in school at the same time, which I
yeah,
didn't even realize.
yeah.
So, I didn't know you at all until I knew you as Father Kreipke. But was curious as to what your experience growing up in Zionsville was
Mhm.
as a cradle Catholic myself. It was a little tough,
Yeah.
probably because of you, Father
Maybe
Tyler.
so, maybe so. Asking all these tough
Lots of
questions.
misconceptions.
Why do y'all worship
So
Mary? Why do you need a priest to talk to
exactly.
God?
Why do you eat Jesus? I
Yeah,
got
it's
that one a lot.
yeah.
Yeah. So that's just funny.
I assume you were reading books and consuming things through this process. Were there certain authors or writings that really touched you during that conversion?
I remember reading a lot of C.S. Lewis in that time,
Oh,
which
yeah.
is kind of ironic because he's not Catholic.
I know.
So
The Catholics I love
yeah,
C.S.
I was gonna say, yeah,
Lewis.
he's wonderful, and he's so Catholic in so much of what he says. I think I started reading some of the catechism. I think the biggest thing was though just the personal conversations
Mm,
and the invitation to mass. I remain convinced of how important those were because like reading about the faith
yeah.
is good and it's important. It's something that I continue to do even to this day. But um, we're an incarnate religion.
Mhm,
We believe there's something to physical presence and the sort of flesh and blood reality of it. And
mhm.
so, I mean, it makes perfect sense to me that it was really the conversations
Yeah.
with my friend Neil or with Father
Mhm.
Brian Dorr or with other Catholics that really kind of opened the door and
Yeah.
dispelled some of those questions that I had.
So what was your parents' reactions?
Yeah, so they were pretty in favor of it, or they were pretty okay with it. I think that out of all of the Kreipkes, I was the most staunchly anti-Catholic, and so
Oh my gosh.
yeah, so they
God has
didn't.
a sense of humor.
Yes, he sure does. He sure does. But the Methodist church that I was going to always stood out to me as sort of a bit non-denominational in its sort of tenor that it struck, and so yeah, I never felt sort of any antipathy or unwelcomeness when I was talking with my parents about my journey in the faith and coming to understand Catholicism a little more deeply. And so I've just always met with great support from them. And I've been very grateful for that there haven't been kind of,
Yeah.
battles on the intellectual front as well as sort of the
Yeah.
emotional or relational front.
That's wonderful.
Definitely. And have they come to watch you at Mass?
Yes, my dad and my brother, and my stepmom have all been very supportive and have come out for, like, the big masses, like my
Right.
first mass and when I took final vows in the Congregation of Holy Cross when I was ordained. Sort of the big ones they've all been sure to be at, and I've been very grateful for that. My dear mother, Christine, she has been the one that's kinda come most along on the journey for me, and so since I usually stay with her whenever I come home, and so she usually comes to mass with me, and so she was at mass here
Mm,
today, and kind of whenever I'm in town, she'll join me for mass, and so
Sweet.
yeah,
I love that.
it's been really wonderful having her support with all that.
That's really cool.
So,
All right, so now we need to hear the part of this journey of
yeah,
discerning well, religious life, really,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. So yeah, that one came kind of midway through grad school because, like I said, even having been going to mass for several years by the time I was actually received into the church, priesthood was still nowhere on the radar. I thought it was still going to be, hey, let's get married, let's have a
Mhm.
family, let's do all that good stuff. But then just the space I was in at Notre Dame was just such a great grounds for growing in my faith. I had a lot of very close friends in my lab and in my building that were devoutly Catholic and thought very deeply about the faith, which was wonderful. All the resources and support that I had at Notre Dame. There was the graduate student community that had like the priest chaplain that was there. Just all of the priests at the University of Notre Dame were a great support
Are,
for
are,
me.
are the priests all Holy Cross brothers?
Holy Cross Brothers and Priests. There are a couple other religious communities there that are studying at Notre Dame. Like I think there's a Jesuit in the chemistry department who teaches, but then especially as a grad student, you've got a lot of Dominicans that are there, Jesuits that
Mm.
are there. And so there are other religious orders there, but it is by and large the Congregation of Holy Cross. They're still the ones that minister and
Mm.
oversee the spiritual well being of the campus, and so just had loads of opportunities to talk with them and grow in the faith. And I remember, so I had been received into the church, and I was kind of staring down the road of this. Okay, mass on Sunday and confession every once in a while, and that is gonna kind of do it for me. But then, while I was going through grad school, it was this time, like I said, of great personal growth, where I'm kind of out on my own for the first time, and I really started coming up against the really big questions in life, and in sort of a very sort of existentially pressing way of like, hey, you need to figure this out now, because up to that point in my life, I had believed in God authentically. My faith was important to me, as I think evidenced by the fact that I actually looked into it and made a decision about it. But there was still this sense in which I had a lot of things going for me. I was still decently athletic at that time, and I had my PhD going for me, and just had a lot of things
Yeah.
kind of going my way in life. And God, I kind of saw as this sort of parallel lane that ran alongside all of it. But at the end of it, if God isn't really real, I'm still doing all right. I still got all this other stuff. And as I was moving through grad school, it just became very clear that no, the question of God and who he is and how he fits into my life is of central and primary importance. And if that's not in place, then nothing else is going to have meaning. And so really sort of as I'm wrestling with these big questions of who am I and who do I want to be and what is this world and what's my place in it and how does God sort of suffuse and uphold and support all of that and how does he fit into it, really started grappling with my faith, and from that entering into it much more deeply. Prayer took on a much more important role in my life, where it now became not just an every once in a while thing, but I need to spend time in silence with God every day to see how he's moving in my life and just to wrestle. And started having a lot more earnest conversations with my friends about the faith, started talking to one of the priests that I had got to know very well during my time in RCIA, and just asking these questions in a very deep way. And kind of arising out of that context was this ability to grow more deeply in my faith. Like I said, prayer took on a much more a much more central role in my life. And I just remember one day, I think it was around Easter time many years ago now, but just this thought kind of breaking in of hey, maybe you should start going to daily mass. They have it on campus and it's right close to you, and maybe you should start doing that. And so prayer led to mass, attending mass led to greater graces, led to go into the sacrament of confession more regularly, and just this growing relationship with Jesus Christ. Out of that, I remember in March, I think of 2013 or 2014, this won't make any difference to people that aren't familiar with the roadways of South Bend, but I remember I was driving south on Twickenham Avenue between State Road 23 and Rockney, and this thought just kind of came up, sort of welled up within me of hey, have you considered the priesthood? And my short response was no, I haven't. And I'm going to ignore this, and I'm going to keep going about my business and doing what I was doing. But that just stands out to me as this very crystallizing moment of all of these graces that had slowly been working their way into my life, and this moment of, okay, the question's here. And like I said, I tried to put it off for a little while, but it kept coming back pretty persistently and pretty tenaciously. And so eventually it was okay, I need to get this sorted out. And it was intimidating. Like I had this whole plan for my life
Yeah.
and everything that, that I wanted to do.
Of course.
And it was just, that was going to be completely upended by joining the priesthood.
It's kind of like when the angel visited Mary.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, there you go. There's she was a
Just
little
on
more.
Rockney,
Yeah, yeah, there you go. I was a little more obstinate than our dear Mother Mary was, but yeah, eventually came around. God was persistent as well, and so I finally reached out to some of the priests that I had gotten to know in the congregation. Father John DeRiso, who was pastor where I converted. Father Tom McNally, who had become a very important spiritual figure for me at Notre Dame, and was just sort of okay, I need to talk to y'all. And we just kind of sat and talked about what the priesthood was, what it wasn't. Again, those misconceptions that you get, and they just sort of dispelled the initial fears, at least, and got
Mhm.
me in touch with the vocations director for the congregation. And again, from there, it was just sort of personal invitation and personal witness. I got to know a lot of the seminarians at Notre Dame, where the seminary for the Congregation of Holy Cross is, and was invited into some faith sharing and faith exploration and discernment groups that I started to take advantage of, and just started implementing those things in my life that I could, that
Mhm.
sort of brought about something of what religious life looks like. Again, with the daily prayer, I started doing liturgy of the hours as well, again with a regular sacramental life. And then on Thursdays, the seminary would have its sort of community night where they would
Mm.
have a night prayer service and then a little social afterwards where you could talk with the seminarians. And again, just going there and just having very powerful experiences of prayer. And then just getting to know the guys and seeing that seminarians were just normal people like myself that had this great desire to serve the Lord and see where he was calling them in their lives. It was a very powerful and compelling witness. And I saw this authentic joy that they had of living in community and serving the Lord together. And it was just something that was held out to me. And like I said, something that I found very compelling. And so even as I'm trying to resist this and just kind of trying to make it go away and be like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm just going to open the door and see that there's nothing there and then I'll move on with my life. I found that as I continued walking down that path, I found a deeper sense of joy resonating in me and that things were just kind of falling into place as they should. And so it just kind of seemed like there was this great current carrying me in that direction all the while. And so by the time I got to the end of grad school and was ready to graduate, it just sort of seemed like the question had a clear answer of, okay, even if I don't need to be a priest, I'm just discerning the next step. I do need to go see what this is all about, and I need to pursue this at seminary at Notre Dame. And so my fall of my last year of graduate school, applied for Moreau Seminary and was accepted and started up the fall after I graduated. And
Wow.
so now here we are.
Well,
That's amazing.
so did you consider any other religious orders?
I considered the diocese for a hot second,
Yeah.
but I need community. I've always had a big emphasis of community in my life. And so it was pretty clear early on that diocesan wasn't going to work for me. I thought about the Jesuits and the Dominicans for a minute as well, but didn't make any real inroads with them because the Congregation of Holy Cross was right there at Notre Dame. And things just had meshed so well with them up to that point. And their charism, the fact that they were educators in the faith, the
Yeah.
fact that they still did education. And so there might be a route to continue using my engineering degree with them. Things were just coming together so well that it didn't seem like that was just coincidence. And it was like, okay, I could go around and look around just cause, but I'm finding a lot of joy and purpose and fulfillment here. And so this is where I think the Spirit is calling me. And so
Yeah.
we're gonna follow this road.
I love how you mentioned with the seminarians that like priests are just like us. Priests are people too.
Yeah.
I love saying that now that I work at a church.
We see a different side of priests.
Yeah.
It certainly changes. You get, all the solemnity and everything that comes with being up in the sanctuary and at the altar and everything. But yeah, I just remember, oh, hey, like these guys like to play games and they make jokes and they talk about things other than just the Bible. And so it was just sort of broke the sheen and made it so much more accessible and compelling because again it's not this God works through people that are completely alien to us. It's like no, he comes from within. That's kind of the whole thing that we're celebrating in Christmas is that God enters into the midst of it and works through it rather than sort of pronouncing from on high or helping from the outside.
And I love your emphasis on community. I am obsessed with telling
She
people
is.
how
Yeah.
important community is.
Yeah.
That's how God works on us.
And I mean, we worship a God who is in himself perfect community and we bear his image and likeness. And so it just makes sense that we too are called to be relational people
Yes.
and enter into those relationships.
Yeah, exactly.
So I do the middle school ministry
God
here.
bless you for it.
And we're actually, when we come back in January, our 7th and 8th graders are going to be learning about why do we pray. So when you were talking about how you really got started was through prayer, what did that look like for you? What was your early prayer life like?
Yeah. Admittedly, I've always been drawn to just sort of silent meditation, and that was kind of the starting point because again, there was just so much going on in my head with all these big questions that I was kind of working myself into knots throughout so much of the day, and prayer was just this opportunity to come in and be like, okay, God, I don't have this all figured out, and I need some help, and just being able to go to the chapel, because we had a chapel on campus, and to just I started off with like 5 to 10 minutes of silent prayer, just allowed something of a reset and the knot to get untangled just a little bit more and to let sort of the roiling waters settle a little bit. And so, yeah, it was one of those things where there weren't like these locutions, like I didn't hear the voice of God coming and saying things, but slowly and surely his graces were starting to shape me and mold me. And the analogy that I always make with it is, because there were very few times, like there were a couple times like in the mass when I started hearing that like, hey, maybe you should go to mass, or when I was driving down Twickenham and heard, hey, you should consider the priesthood. Those were these sort of very clear messages that came, but more often than not, they weren't in like focused times of prayer. And so I came to see prayer as sort of this time when I would just sit in the chapel and I'd kind of tune the radio dials, so that when the message came in, I could receive it as clearly and as loudly as possible. And it was just this time to be in the presence of the Lord and to start to come to recognize his voice. And that idea of, I know my sheep and my
Yeah.
sheep know me and they hear my voice and follow me. That if you sit with prayer, even if there's not like this clear path of, oh, it was A and then B and then C and then D, over time you're going to realize that you recognize the voice
Mhm.
of the shepherd a whole lot better than you might have thought. And that was kind of the experience for me, was like, I'm just going to go and I'm going to be there. And just being present, God works with that and finds ways to make himself known and make his will known in your life. And so that was very important to me. And like I said, in that space of tuning the radio dials, then the messages could come in of, hey, maybe you should consider going to daily mass. Hey, maybe you should consider praying the liturgy of the hours. Hey, maybe you should consider this. And
And
so,
you just know it's from him because you've learned what his voice
yeah,
sounds like.
it's incredibly hard to articulate, but
Mhm.
I know kind of the first time where I hear the intimation, in a particular direction, and then let it kind of bear out. Like, does it come back? Does it persist? Does it bring a sense of peace with it? Is it backed by the teachings and the experience of the church and all of that? And so, there are a lot of safeguards to help
Mhm.
going from too far off the rails. But again, there comes the point where, like, if you listen long enough, eventually you come to recognize more quickly and a little more
I
easily.
call 'em Holy Spirit nudges.
Amen. That "Come Holy Spirit" is my favorite prayer far and away, and I use it all the time, and it's universally applicable, and it's, yeah, just so helpful. So,
That's really cool. Okay, so how long was seminary?
seminary was 7 years all told,
Oh,
so
wow.
our postulant year, our novice year, 4 years of theology, and then the deacon year.
And then I assume not all of them become priests.
No, there's a pretty high attrition rate. I mean, I had one of the biggest classes in a number of years, a number of decades even, at Holy Cross. 16 men start, and we ended with 10, 8 priests and 2 brothers.
Okay.
And that's pretty common. And so, like I said, when I was discerning seminary, I wasn't discerning priesthood. I was discerning entering the seminary. And
Mhm.
that's what they always tell you in the vocations office is, listen, you're not discerning Z from point A, you're discerning point B from point A. And let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's just discern the next step. And so, really, when you come to seminary, I mean, we're there, so we've got to train like we're
Mhm.
like we're training for the priesthood. But at the same time, the more primary thing that you're doing in seminary is seeking God's will in your life. And yeah, we've got some things to keep us busy and make sure we're not just navel gazing the entire day. But at the same time, there are these conversations where it's not like, okay, what do we need to do to make sure you get to the priesthood? It's, what do we need to do to make sure that you're hearing God's will in your life? And
Awesome.
so there are men that God calls to the seminary that he doesn't intend to become
Mm.
priests. But as I was reflecting on this, as I was going through, even if I had left, none of the time in seminary would have been wasted.
Mhm.
It's, again, this very intentional time to grow in faith, intellectually, spiritually, habitually, in just all of these different ways. And again, to develop the tools to hear God calling you more clearly in your life. And so there are a lot of men that come into seminary and come out as priests and very devout and devoted priests. And then there are men who come into seminary and leave as very devoted and devout people on the path to being a husband and being a father, and all of these different ways that they can serve out in the world. And so, yeah, that's a very standard thing in seminary, is to discern out and find where else God is calling you in your life.
What
Wow.
was the most difficult part for you as a seminarian?
Oh gosh, just the insecurity. I remember so many times just wanting to run screaming from the seminary. And I didn't have a good reason to leave. I was scared and was sort of grappling with, my own unworthiness for this particular vocation, and having a lot of good vocations directors who would talk to me that, like, God doesn't speak to us in fear or in
Mhm.
this sort of way that the path in front of us closes down. He speaks to us in peace in a way that opens up. And, I had discerned my way into the seminary, but then as I started was sort of beset by a lot of doubt. And it was one of those where it was like, I didn't have a particularly good reason to stay, but I didn't have a good reason to leave. And I kind of told myself, like, you cannot leave if you don't have a good reason to leave. And so I stuck with it. And I remember we have our novitiate is out in Colorado Springs, and I was out for a run one day, and I remember I was passing by this little bed and breakfast in the little town that was right by our novitiate, and that was kind of the moment of like, okay, I've been pursuing this with kind of a foot in both camps of, well, maybe I'll stay in the seminary and maybe I'll leave, and those paths were becoming more and more divergent. I felt like I was starting to do the splits
Mhm.
between them. And there just came that moment of, okay, God, like, I'm going to trust you that this is the path you want me to be on. And I was able to take my feet and kind of put them both into the camp of being a seminarian and
Yeah.
pursuing the priesthood. And there just came such a peace with that, there were still kind of doubts and insecurities and issues that came up that needed to be addressed as we were going through. But that was another particularly crystallizing moment of, okay, God, that like I trust you know whom you've called, better even than I know myself, and that you're leading me along this path, and you're not gonna play this game of gotcha once we're too far down the road. And so we're just gonna follow this. And yeah, just kind of working through all of that and kind of trusting even in these moments of I shouldn't be here. This isn't for me. And allowing to persist through that into this space of no, you are. And there are things at work right now that maybe you don't understand completely, but trust me, walk with me, and see how this path opens up in front of you.
It's really cool to see how God's kind of really working on helping you surrender and just kind of forming you through that
Yeah.
process.
Yeah, and it's yeah, just grace at
Yeah.
work of this sort of, okay, there's a lot of things that we're gonna need to talk through, but it's not all gonna be done in one day, but let's
Mhm.
just stick with it, and again, trust that I know what I'm doing
Yeah.
and that the congregation knows what they're doing, and we'll see where this
Mhm.
road continues to go. And the fact that it just opened up into such a space of peace and joy and all of those things that resonate with vocation was just a great grace.
Didn't you feel like that was some spiritual attack though on you, kind of planting those seeds of doubt and fear?
Yeah, probably so. And I mean, the enemy has all of these different ways that he gets us. One of the things I've heard is that, the devil calls us by our sins and
Oh.
God calls us by our name. Yeah, it's again this thing of, there is this aspect of spiritual warfare, and there's going to be a lot of things that come up, and learning to move into that space of trust and, okay, I'm not smarter and stronger than the devil, but God is. And
Mhm.
so I'm just going to stay close to him. But then also realizing in those spaces of spiritual attack, like that's another place to meet our Lord, who
Mhm.
himself, had the agony in the garden, had the Via Dolorosa. I'm sure in his quiet and hidden life had these wrestlings with, doubt and insecurity and just not like why aren't
Yeah.
these people understanding me?
Mhm.
That sort of stuff, and feeling rejection and things like that. That even those moments are privileged encounters with our crucified and risen Lord. And so being able to move into that space, I mean, the congregation, our motto is the cross as our only hope, hail the cross, our only hope. And to realize that even in those moments of bearing our crosses, of carrying them, of spiritual attack, of doubt, of all of these things that are so difficult to deal with, that those themselves become privileged vessels of God's grace, like that. That's unassailable hope. That like even in these times where I feel lowest, where I feel farthest away from God, where I feel most distant, like that's running from the Father into the arms of the Son. That's just a yeah, that's a hope that's unassailable, and that's kind of our supreme, our consummate hope. And so yeah, that aspect of our spirituality has just come to resonate more and more through my experience.
And so you graduated from seminary in what year?
In 2023.
And then you have a year of the diaconate?
Yep.
And so are you placed somewhere during that time?
Yeah, so I was placed at the University of Portland in Oregon, where I continue to live and work and minister. So coming into seminary, they knew that I had my PhD in engineering and that we're a teaching order, and that, it's not every day that you get an engineering professor that's also a priest. And so they were keen to keep me using those
Mhm.
skills, which I was very grateful for because I really love that kind of work. And so they knew that I had been at Notre Dame for about a dozen years at that point. I had worked very closely with the aerospace and mechanical engineering department, had gotten very comfortable there. And they knew that I was more drawn to the teaching aspect of the job, and that my research chops maybe weren't Notre Dame level research chops. But they were like, Tyler, we've got this school out in Portland, Oregon that is really focused on teaching and has an engineering department we think would be a really good fit for you. And so we would like you to go out there and see how it goes. And so I went there my diaconate year, and it was just sort of like, okay, let's try it on for size and see how it fits. And it was a really great experience. Found a lot of fruit being born in in the classroom and working with my colleagues and just being a presence in an area where it's not particularly church.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there's just been a lot of joy and a lot of purpose that I've found there. The community out there is great that I live and minister with, and it's just been a great grace to be able to bring together my love of engineering and my love of teaching, my love of serving the Lord, just kind of bringing those all
Yeah.
together in one, and doing just like the particularly priestly ministry of saying mass, hearing confessions, being
Yeah.
a spiritual resource has really worked well. And so after kind of the first year, it was like, okay, this is where I'm supposed to be. We're gonna be here for the foreseeable future. And so that's where I currently am. I'm currently working as an assistant professor, working towards tenure out there. And it's been a great grace. And then I also don't mind the schedule of having the semesters where I'm very, very busy, very full days, a lot of things going on, but then around Christmas time, get to take a little break, come home to San Alfonso, get to say a couple of the masses here and see the people and see my friends here. And then again, after the school year ends, to have a little bit of time in summer to come back to Indiana and spend some time in the Midwest again and visit home.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Now, when you say they mention Portland to you, do you have a choice in where you go, or are they saying, "How about this?" And you say, "Okay."
Yeah. I've taken vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. And
Right.
so if I really dug my feet in and said I'm not going, then I don't think they could make me. And sometimes it does happen in religious life that it is something of a back and forth conversation where
Mhm.
it's like, no, I really don't think this is going to go well, and they'll kind of
Yeah.
accommodate that. But we had an open and frank conversation about it. Of like, listen, this is what I'd like to do. This is what I'd prefer. This is where I see my gifts, my skill sets lying. And then they take that into account and they say, okay, having listened to you and prayed over it, this is where we still need you to go. And again, having taken a vow before God of obedience to where the congregation is sending me, it's one of those where if I do decide to dig my heels in and just kind of stay put, I'm going to have some explaining to do at some point. And so, yeah, and it's one of those where we talk about the three vows, and if you ask religious to a man, they'll tell you that the most difficult one is the vow of obedience. And there's a certain amount of humility that comes with that in terms of, okay, we see gifts in you that you might not see in yourself. And, we never have real certainty in how things are going. And maybe this will be a misstep, but God continues to work through those. And so allowing yourself to kind of move into that space of, okay, having listened for the call of the Spirit, this is where we believe that He's calling us. And so we're going to take the next trusting step in that. And just allowing that to bear fruit in such untold ways is a great grace. And again, the vow can be a particularly hard one, but I mean, precisely because of that, it can be such an opportunity for growth, deepening of that relationship.
Well, how do you decide that you're officially ready?
I still don't know if I am. If I'm being perfectly honest.
Well, you're here.
Yeah, here I am. No, there does come a point where I think it was 2 years into vows when the kind of thought was like, okay, if final vows were tomorrow, I think I'd be ready to take them. And it grows slowly with time. Um, I think the analogy of marriage is very helpful in this and maybe a little more accessible to a lot of lay people in terms of like, okay, well, when was the moment that you knew you wanted to marry your husband or you knew you wanted to marry your wife? And it's like, well, it's not that easy, right?
Mhm.
Like it's this confluence of all these events, and maybe there's a crystallizing moment where you look back and realize, yeah, I think I'm ready for this. But at the same time, there's not one time. And so that was kind of the case for me where, I had these sort of experiences in the balance, and eventually the scales tipped towards I think I'm ready for this. And yeah, that was probably midway through my theology studies where it was like, okay, I've now been doing this for 3 or 4 years, and I've I've found nothing but joy as I've lived into this, even in the difficulties. I've, been convinced that this is where I'm being called. And we're going to trust that this way of life, being so grounded in the sacraments and in prayer, being surrounded by a community of people that are trying to go about this same task, it fits. And there's still so much to learn, there's still so much I'm unprepared for, but if we wait until we're fully prepared for everything, we're
Mhm.
going to be just sitting around twiddling our thumbs until Jesus comes back.
So, when did you meet Father Travis? When did you drop in and kind of tell him what was happening?
Yeah, so gosh, when did Father
So I'm
Kreipke.
guessing fellow PhDs, you guys have a lot to talk about.
Yeah, we've a little bit here and there, and he teaches, and the fact that he's a pastor and teaches is beyond me. I know I have enough to do without running a parish as well, so God bless him for that. But I met Father Travis the summer that he started. I
Okay.
came back in the summer and had lunch with him and got to know him a little bit and kind of talk about his
Nice.
experiences. But yeah, I also remember because I started coming here when Father O'Keefe was still
Okay.
here. And I do remember I was very impressed with him because after it had come out that I was entering seminary at the Congregation of Holy Cross and was back on my home visit, one day after daily mass he came up and he was like, "We should go get breakfast." And I was like, "Okay, Father." And yeah, because like I was kind of like a satellite Catholic
Yeah.
whenever I came here. I had kind of like found some Catholic families that I plugged in with. So like Mike and Lori Hennigan was very close with them. Their daughter Sarah was
Mhm.
in my class as well, and she's now married to Neil, my friend. So yeah, so I knew the Hennigans when I was becoming Catholic, and they were so welcoming, and they kind of brought me into their church family. So I'm at breakfast with Father O'Keefe, and he's like, "I don't know this guy from Adam. Like, I've never talked to him." He's like, "You have been sitting in this particular spot in my church for the past number of years, and like, just think we should talk, and I want to know your story." And so I was like, "There's a pastor. There's a man who knows this flock, and even the people kind of
So
out
did
on the
he know you
margins."
were just starting seminary? He just randomly invited you to
No,
breakfast?
I think he had known,
Okay.
but then after the fact, he was kind of putting the pieces together. There's been something going on
Yeah.
with this young man who's been kind of accompanying the Hennigans to
Interesting.
church and sitting in daily mass in this particular spot for a while. But the fact that like it wasn't just like, "Hey, I heard you're
Yeah.
in the seminary, we should probably talk about it," but it was, "Okay, you've been on a journey that's kind of been going on in the background and maybe we should talk about it." That just stands out in my mind as a very shepherding move.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I have a lot of respect for Father O'Keefe, and I'm very grateful because as I was discerning seminary, he was always very supportive, and whenever I'd come back in town, would talk with me and see how things were going, and would share his viewpoint and everything. And so yeah, getting to know Father O'Keefe and then Father Travis in his time, it's always the Congregation of Holy Cross was founded, one, to do education, but we were also founded as auxiliary priests in the diocese.
Mm.
And so we have it kind of in our DNA to be at the service of the diocese that we're in. And so that's always engendered a great love and a great respect for the diocesan priesthood and a great gratitude for the work that they do and sort of
Mhm.
carrying out the Lord's work in the parishes. And so it's always been wonderful for me to come back and see the work that parish priests are doing in a little more at that kind of level. And yeah, just to kind of talk with them about their experiences and see what it's like and kind of the other vocational track of the priesthood.
It's not easy.
No,
Yeah.
no, it's
Yeah.
not. There's a lot of things you gotta work through and a lot of difficult dynamics to
Mhm.
kind of work out. Yeah, I'm just always grateful for that witness that they offer.
Mhm. Yes, for sure. That's really neat.
What does a typical day look like for you as a professor and a priest?
Yeah.
How do you balance that?
Yeah, so days can get very full, and so it's important to kind of safeguard my alone time with the Lord. And so I'll usually wake up and I just start off with my liturgy of the hours, the prayers that I need to do a couple times a day, and then from that I'll move into time with Scripture, and then I'll head down to the chapel and spend about a half hour in silent meditation with the Lord, just kind of like, okay, we got a day coming. There's a lot of things going on right now, but here we are. And then from there, I usually get a little workout in. I'll go bike or I'll go run or something. And then we have morning prayer and community. And then from there, I'll head to the office. And there it'll be, okay, got some things to do, whether it's, lecture prep or grading or office hours or writing homilies or whatever it
Wow.
needs to be. There's just a lot of things that come up there. There's also like department meetings and school meetings and things like that. Uh, but the next several hours are kind of a whole slew of just work on what needs to be worked on, whether it's more related specifically to being a professor or more specifically to being a priest, whichever seems to be the more pressing deadline. And then, obviously teaching class and things like that. But that'll kind of carry me through until the end of the day. Obviously, we'll work mass in there somewhere usually. And then evening prayer with the community, dinner with the community, and then whatever needs to be taken care of. Some days we have mass in the dorms that I'm responsible for. And so I'll say mass sort of in the evening.
Mm.
Sometimes we have adoration in the evening that I'll go to. Sometimes it'll just be, okay, I've still got some work to do. And so we're going to prep. Sometimes it's, okay, I just need to rest and I'm just going to go home and read a book maybe and do my thing. And then we've also got a little little wood shop near the place where our retired priests live, and sometimes some of the priests will and brothers will congregate there and just kind of hang out and unwind after
The man
perhaps a long
cave.
day. The man cave, and so sometimes we'll throw a game on and just kind of
Nice.
sit and unwind. So yeah, that can take me to kind of the end of the day where as I get ready for bed, I'm usually trying to do a little spiritual reading and night prayer and things like that, and then kind of move into rest to get ready for the next day. And so that's there are variations and permutations of that, but that's kind of the main thrust of things at this current stage.
How many of you are in community there?
We've got about We've got about 17 of us. We try to come together regularly for evening prayer and dinner and morning prayer, but we've got a lot of hats that we wear, and so
Yeah.
sometimes we get a little scattered. And so at prayer and dinner, we can have anywhere from 5 to all of us, but we're usually kind of around 10 to a dozen. And so, yeah, we've got a number of priests there that are well into their 80s and 90s and retired and are just kind
Okay.
of aging in place. And they're a wonderful witness of sort of the religious life kind of lived through. And they're now looking back
Mm.
towards the end where it's like, okay, like I've done my time of service in this sort of active role, and now I'm just here witnessing to like what it can look like to have lived a
Mm.
religious life, and just to see the joy with which they live is a great witness to us who are kind of just getting started, and sometimes have the questions of like what have I got ahead of me here? Then we've got some of the priests that are a little older and are maybe in administration or things like that, and then we've got a couple of our younger priests and brothers who are just kind of still early on in the career, but trying to pursue the Lord with zeal and serve in the vineyard. And but yeah, it's a really wonderful dynamic to have those intergenerational members of the community where you
Mhm.
do get this sort of the different strata of priesthood. Again, the kind of up and coming, just getting
Yeah.
started, mid career, late career, and then just preparing to return to the Lord even.
Well, it's
So
nice because you can kind of mentor each other and
yeah.
have someone to talk to, and
Yeah,
yeah.
and that's one of the biggest things about being in community is with priesthood, there are some times where you can carry some heavy loads,
Mhm.
and being able to sit down and talk with people like, "Hey, this really didn't go well today," can be a great consolation. But then also, "Hey, like this was really great, and
Yeah,
I'm really excited about this." Like being able to share that with people as well adds another sense of richness to it.
that's
And
neat.
if you talk about people that have joined Holy Cross, again, I think to a man they will mention how important the community was in their discernment. And I get it. Like, it's just such a blessing to be able to kind of ideate and brainstorm about
Yeah.
particular things and, hey, I'm not really sure about this. How do I approach this? To just have those checks in place and again, to be able to process the stuff that really needs processing, but then also just to be able to go to the shop and unwind watching a
Yeah.
football game is really important as well. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
I've just been very grateful to have them.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Very cool.
What does the student body look like? Like, are they all Catholic students? No, not.
No, I'm shaking my head. No, so the Pacific Northwest is, pretty unchurched. I think it's about, like, 17% Christian out there. So, a majority of our students are not Christian or Catholic. I think we're at about 33% of the students are Catholic, but we've recently been, developing this sort of, eased acceptance program or this accelerated acceptance program with Catholic schools in the region, even some key Catholic schools in particular regions that we're interested in trying to draw students from. And I think we're working on a program for all of the Holy Cross high schools to have this sort of preferred acceptance into the University of Portland. And I think we just started putting that into place last year, and I think our student uh, body demographic of Catholics bumped up to about 40%. So I think that's working, and maybe that will continue to grow um, as we go forward with this program. But yeah, it's a majority of our students, and in some cases, a vast majority of our students, relatively unchurched. But I would consider it unchurched, not anti-church, because I haven't met with any real antipathy towards my faith at the school. And yeah, you'll get some people obviously that disagree or don't buy it or things like that. But I've found that there are a lot of students that want to talk about that stuff. There are a lot of students that appreciate that aspect of our mission out there. And I think there is something of an intuition of what I'm trying to be there for, because there are a number of students, even non-Catholic and non-Christian students will kind of poke their head in when they see I'm there and just be like, "Hey, do you have a minute to talk?" Always invite them in. I have a little dish of chocolates in my office in case they want, um, and they'll just kind of open up and talk about stuff that's on their mind, especially if there's something that's troubling them at home or with their health or their family's health or things like that. And, being a priest, at a Catholic university, I don't kind of shy away from, are you much the praying type? What's your faith background look like? And, some of them will say, well, I don't pray much. I don't have much of a faith, but I'd appreciate it if you pray for me. And
Oh,
so having that opportunity to engage with students, I mean, gosh, I know that sometimes being in what could be considered mission territory can seem very daunting to many people, but like what a grace it is to be able to talk with these students that don't have any like framework
mhm.
for what the gospel is. I get to witness to this with my very life. What a grace. To just be able to have that opportunity is something that I really love about being at the University of Portland. And it's one of those like, yeah, we've got work to do, but thanks be to God, we've got work to do. There's a hunger here and there's a thirst here, there's a curiosity here. We have the best news that could be given, and it's ours to share it. And we get to share it with some people for the first time. We get to share it with some people in a new way. There's just so much that can be done with this, and we get to have this opportunity to go out and work in the vineyard. What could be better?
Well, and are you seeing, because here, I mean, the number of people in their 20s, especially young men, is through the roof converting to the church.
Yeah, and you hear about those trends. We in the we are rather in the Archdiocese of Portland are seeing that kind of similar
Mhm.
resurgence where I think we had over 1,200 people received into the church this year in the
That's
Archdiocese.
amazing.
Yeah, and so the spirit seems to be moving, and we are doing a little more now at the university to kind of strengthen and live into our Catholic identity
That's
a little more explicitly and a little more fully, which I'm very grateful for. And yeah, like I think there are still a lot of students that aren't beating down my doors and like, hey, how do I
yeah.
become Catholic? But again, I'm trying to present a joyful, well articulated witness
Mhm.
of the faith and just trying to create moments where grace can come through. I'm kind of in that space of like, I'm 3 years into my time out there, and so these aren't things that are going to kind of
No,
come up overnight or raise up overnight. I'm working to plant seeds
exactly.
that will one day bear fruit, and it's kind of one of those trusting where it's like, okay, I'm going to get up. I'm going to cooperate with the graces of God as well as I can,
Mhm.
ideally. Well, still a fallen human person, but I'd like to think I'm trying most days cooperate with those graces to make God known, loved, and served, and to trust that, okay, Lord, if I cooperate with the graces that you give me, you know what you're about, and you're going to bring forth from that something that's kind of beyond my ken, beyond my
Yeah.
understanding. And uh, again, that's developing and cultivating that life of prayer, of being with the Spirit to kind of have that sense of, okay, you may not understand all of this, you may not see all of the ends that it's going into, but trust me, take the step, cooperate with the graces that I'm offering you, and trust that I'm going to take care of the rest of this.
How amazing just hearing your story for the
Yeah.
first time to be able to look back and be like, well, now you're the person who's inviting,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, that
yeah,
is
So
cool.
you're
yeah,
inviting people who were your age when you got invited,
yeah,
Mhm.
and you get to do that every day. So it makes me want to tear up just to
yeah,
think about you get to look back and see that.
yes,
Right.
yeah,
And so
no,
maybe you don't see what their result is down the road, but you get to know that you are able to do that, inviting in a joyful way. And
yeah,
it's amazing.
yeah. And I will say, being a professor of engineering and a priest, there aren't really any days where it's kind of like, what was like, what did I do today? Because I get to offer the mass. Greatest thing that we can do, I get to do every day. And I get to pray for my students. I get to invite them into relationship with the living God. It's just a grace. And the fact that I get to participate in that still holds a lot of awe and wonder for me. And a lot of gratitude as well that again, it could be the worst day that I've had.
Mhm.
Nothing has gone right. It's all just felt like one thing falling apart after another. I get to spend time with the living God in prayer. I get to offer the mass for his people, for the church, and for the world. And I get to invite people into a relationship with him. And again, what could be better than that?
Exactly.
And it's just one of those things where I stand back from time to time and just am kind of wowed by it all.
That's awesome.
Well, we're grateful that you took the time to listen, right? That's
Yes.
where it started.
Yeah,
So we
exactly.
can
sure.
tell our middle schooler
Yeah,
and everyone else, it starts with listening.
it sure
Yeah.
does. Yeah.
Okay, so our question that we always try to ask people at the end now is, who is your favorite saint and why? Or what is your favorite Bible quote?
Yeah. Yeah, I can't go favorite saint. I have like tiers of saints.
Yes,
that,
I get
you know,
it.
like levels
Yeah.
of saints that I absolutely love. Like Saint Benedict and Saint Francis and Blessed Basil Moreau come very readily to mind, among so many others.
Mhm.
So let's go with the favorite Bible quote, and that's I'm gonna not be able to get all of it, but it's Romans 8:35-39, where it's for I am convinced that neither
Mm.
height nor depth nor angels nor past things nor present things nor future things will be able to separate us from the love that we have in Christ Jesus. And that's just always spoken to me in a very deep way. And just being convinced that in the messiness and the difficulty, and then also the joy and the triumph and everything that goes into human existence, God has entered into that and sanctified it with his presence. And so there's nothing in this life that can stand in the way of God's love for us. And again, I think even our spirituality and the congregation of Holy Cross, of Hail the Cross, our only hope, that on the cross there was trial and distress and persecution and the sword for Christ. There were all of these things. We threw our worst at him, and through it all, his love continues to reach out to us. And again, that's unassailable hope. When the worst things that we have done, the worst things that we experience, those become privileged encounters of God's grace. Again, that's an invincible hope. That's an unconquerable hope. And so that quote, that verse from Scripture has just always spoken to me in a very deep way and continues to unfold its meaning.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, of course.
Yes,
To meet with
Thank you so
us,
much.
yeah.
I appreciate the invitation. It's been wonderful to sit and talk for a little while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Glad you're able to come home for a bit.
Yeah, me too.
and
Me
hang
too.
out with
It's always a
us.
joy to be here. I'm always so warmly received by the parishioners here, and it's just a great joy to be able to come home and celebrate with everyone.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Father.
Thank you
Yeah,
very much.
enjoy
I
the rest of
appreciate
your
it.
break.
Yeah, you as well. God bless.